My name is Scott Martzloff, and I am the Superintendent of Schools in the Williamsville Central School District. School district in suburban Buffalo of slightly more than 10,000 students. I'm also the parent of a second grader, a fourth grader, and a fifth grader. First of all, I want to thank members of the New York State Assembly who are here this evening to hear concerns from educators and parents. New York State adopted the Common Core standards in 2010. And now, 3 years later, we are finally starting to talk about whether or not it makes sense for our most precious resource, our children. Preceding and including this time period, we have had education reform commissions without educators on them, a Regents reform agenda that includes the Common Core implementation, changes to teacher and principal evaluation systems that now include student test scores, along with massive decreases in New York State funding for public education. Over the past few years, concerns about the Common Core implementation in New York State have often been dismissed or worse, not even heard. These changes have been implemented swiftly and ferociously with little regard for how they truly impact children. Anyone that speaks up to offer suggestions for improvement or ask for more time to implement these massive systemic changes is painted quickly as an obstructionist, apathetic, or stuck in the status quo. I'm not asking you this evening to completely change everything, but clearly there are actions that can be taken now to make our pre-K through 12 education system in New York State better for children. Now, I have to tell you, I came prepared this evening to speak at length about the Common Core curriculum, not about the Regents reform agenda. While there is some information sprinkled in here about the reform agenda with APPR and the focus on test scores and those sorts of things, most of my discussion is about the Common Core curriculum, and it is the least of our problems. The Common Core curriculum, there's been many curricula tried and implemented over decades in New York State and all across the country. We just recognized a teacher in Williamsville at our recent Board of Education meeting. Mrs. Syracuse is in her 41st year as a teacher in New York State, and all in Williamsville. And she lamented how she's been through something called individualization. Never heard of that. Criterion referenced, not sure what she's talking about. Continuous progress, all right, now I'm starting to catch up. Whole language and the Common Core. All those different initiatives, changes, really, while there was some discussion about them, have never been to the point where they are today. Because let's be clear, the issue is less about the Common Core curriculum implementation and more about the stress and anxiety that everyone is under and the pressure that educators, parents, students are perceiving, whether real or perceived, the pressure that they're under to produce results. And quite frankly, I'm surprised we haven't had more situations like they've had in Atlanta and Washington, D.C., where there's been widespread allegations of cheating on the test because there's much at stake. The Common Core standards represent a core set of academic standards that were nationally and internationally benchmarked. They provide a common foundation and are intended to be the central or most important elements of a district's curriculum. The federal government's Common Core initiative also gave each state flexibility to add to this core set of standards. In turn, New York State has given school districts the ability to focus on their own unique interests and best respond to the needs of their students. For example, in Williamsville, we are implementing the modules for ELA, but not in mathematics. Also in the Williamsville Central School District, teachers, administrators, and district staff responded immediately when New York State adopted the Common Core standards by forming curriculum teams and by developing and providing professional development for our teachers prior to the implementation statewide. As a result of this work, teams refined and expanded their focus on various topics at each grade level as needed to either respond to any potential gaps from the previous standards or to address areas in which students might encounter challenges. Because this type of curriculum work is recursive, again, we've been doing it for decades, this was and continues to be a coordinated and focused effort among our teachers and administrators. Overall, within our district, the Common Core has been found to be a well-structured set of standards that are causing educators to better focus their instruction and reflect more deeply on the processes and practices of teaching students across content areas. Like any set of standards, they are not perfect. Education and research, which includes curriculum enhancement, continues to evolve. And at minimum, the Common Core, we believe, has encouraged greater rigor and higher degrees of critical thinking than ever before. It is important to note that in addition to implementing the Common Core standards, the state required school districts to simultaneously implement new assessments, a new evaluation system for teachers and principals, as well as other unfunded mandates. The effect of this change on people cannot be ignored. Unfortunately, school districts were at the mercy of the state implementation timeline, which is simply too fast. The state's timeline was unrealistic for any district to implement the Common Core standards to the fullest extent. In feedback given directly to Dr. John King and Ken Slentz from the State Education Department by our district staff, it was shared that the State Education Department's implementation timeline was too hurried and would not provide districts the necessary time to adequately prepare curriculum and materials. It is our understanding that the Common Core authors themselves suggested that there would be great difficulty with effective implementation of the Common Core prior to September 2013. In response, Dr. King and Mr. Slentz reasoned that New York State was awarded Race to the Top money based on its proposed timeline. They also said that students did not deserve to wait another year for the Common Core, stating, "We don't have time to waste. Too many kids are failing." This has unfortunately become the common refrain heard when initiative needs to be rushed along in its implementation. As stated earlier, anyone that asks for a reasonable time frame to reasonably implement such a large change as the Common Core implementation, you're quickly dismissed as someone who does not desire accountability or simply wants to maintain the status quo. Our concern, and one shared among school districts, is the inefficient time to effectively unpack the standards, write new curriculum, develop and deliver professional development, and identify or build resources to deliver the curriculum. Although you may hear that the Common Core was around since 2010, not one Common Core module was released by the New York State Education Department prior to September 2012, and even then the new modules were released piecemeal throughout last school year, along, by the way, with 5 different changes to the 135-page New York State Education Department guidance document for APPR. A longer implementation window would have afforded districts the time to adequately respond to professional development needs and actually allow teachers to adjust their practice before implementing new assessments, unproven assessments at that, connected to their evaluations. While testing has always been a present in New York State, some students may experience test anxiety. Students' attitudes toward learning largely, I don't believe, are shaped by tests. Rather, attitudes are shaped by their experiences and the messages they receive from those around them. The Common Core standards have resulted in an increased focus on content development. Some of these instructional approaches, such as helping students develop a deeper conceptual understanding of content, take more effort on everyone's part, certainly by teachers, students, and parents, and may cause students a certain level of challenge, which in turn is unsettling to some of us. The new state tests, or any large shift in curriculum or instructional practice, can bring about negative reactions if teachers do not acquire the necessary information, skills, or background knowledge to adapt their instruction. Also, we cannot ignore another major concern about this assessments, which stems from how test scores are now being used as a component of evaluations. This has caused teachers to feel a great deal of additional pressure as it relates to the outcome of the test. One of the other major flaws of the New York State testing protocols is that teachers, administrators, school boards do not get to see the results of the tests. The State Education Department only releases about 25% of the items because they want to reuse questions for future tests. This practice, unfortunately, defeats the best purpose of assessment, especially in grades 3 through 8, when the assessment should be used as a tool to improve teaching and learning. Another item related to testing protocol is timeliness. Certainly, districts have been in a great hurry to implement all of this as required by the New York State Education Department. However, I would ask that the State Education Department be in a little bit more hurry to provide timely feedback to students, parents, and school districts. They actually moved the test from May until April in order to provide themselves with more time to calculate the results and provide those to districts, teachers, and parents in a more timely way. Providing these results 5 months later is not helpful nor meaningful. Local district administrators have been instrumental in implementing the Common Core. Working together with teachers, principals, and others have done a tremendous job. In terms of the financial aspect, funding to support all of these efforts was and continues to be a major consideration, as monies from Race to the Top were very limited. You heard Mr. Cornell mention $700 million. Not much of that got to the school district level. In our school district, we had slightly more than $70,000 that was provided to the Williamsville School District that was doled out over a 3-year period. The cost of implementation for the Regents Reform Agenda is well over $1 million and counting. Certainly during the most prolonged period of financial retrenchment for school districts in recent history, these added costs are incredibly difficult for school districts to grapple with. While the demands of the Common Core implementation demands time of principals, curriculum leaders, and others has been enormous, the amount of time spent working together on the quagmire also represents one of the bright spots about the reform agenda. Principals and teachers are having many more conversations about what excellent teaching and learning should look like at all levels of our school district. In Williamsville, for example, our administrators and teachers collaborated on selecting a teacher evaluation rubric. Training was held and follow-up occurred. Observations and follow-up discussions with teachers now take place at least twice per year rather than once every 3 years. I also lastly would like to talk about student data, something that I'm quite passionate about. In Williamsville, every effort is made to keep student data secure and follow mandated data collection processes and reporting requirements. If you like, I can provide for you a list of reports that our school district and all school districts in New York State provide to the State Education Department. It is enormous. For many years, all school districts have been required to submit information to both state and federal agencies. Regarding the new education data portal in New York State, there is great concern regarding the reporting of data to outside entities and security of data that is kept by third-party vendors such as InBloom. There is no current parental opt-out option for this New York State Education Department initiative. Despite repeated assurances by the state, no one can guarantee that the information will be secure. Just look at the issues of confidentiality at the federal level. What happens to the data in the future? Does it become part of a national tracking database, or could it be sold someday to another company or to advertisers? Could the data be used to be held against a student later in life when applying for college or even a job? These are just a few of the major concerns that I have as not only the superintendent of schools, but also as a parent. In addition, like many districts, we already have a parent and teacher portal developed by and customized for our school district. The Williamsville Information Tracking System maintains all required data and is compliant with all state and federal reporting requirements. The InBloom program would be an expensive redundancy, mandated cost between $1 and $5 per student for our school district and represents Yet another unfunded state mandate. As a superintendent of schools and a parent of 3 young children, I believe student and parent data, by the way, is sacrosanct. The Williamsville School District has no plans to share this confidential information with a third-party vendor, and I urge the State Education Department to reconsider this ill-conceived initiative. I also urge you to pass legislation immediately to protect the privacy of our parents and our children. In conclusion, I'll echo some of the other comments. Please slow these initiatives down. Appoint a group of educators to study the Common Core, APPR, and other recent systemic changes. Eliminate the need to share data with third-party vendors. Insist that any new mandate or initiative that comes from New York State be thoroughly studied with true input from teachers in the field. Lastly, please consider becoming a leader in changing the tenor of conversation regarding public education. It has become popular to attack teachers, administrators, and our entire public education system. While there is always room for growth and improvement, like there is everywhere, we need to stop vilifying those who are trying to shape the minds of our children and prepare them for the challenges of the future. Lastly, I will mention that at 4:47 p.m. this evening, while I was in line at Wegmans before I came here, I received an email from Pearson informing me that I needed to provide 41 new field tests for our students in Williamsville this school year, 34 of which will be online. I can't believe that this continues to move forward with online testing. Haven't we learned from what's going on with healthcare? Thank you very much.
Your point is very, very well taken, very timely. Thank you. Just an FYI too, this past session, the Assembly did pass a bill that would protect student data. I don't know if did it go through the Senate? I don't think the Senate didn't take that up or didn't pass it, but there are efforts on our side in our House to move forward, and I think you bring up some very, very valuable points on that. Just another issue too, in case anyone didn't know this, when we were negotiating the budget this past spring, one proposal that the governor had made would be to give each district the ability to waive any reporting requirements that they didn't deem necessary. All they needed to do was send a letter to the state ed saying, for these reasons we do not believe it's necessary for us to provide these reports. That piece of language was ultimately taken out of the bill and was not included in the final budget. That's something I know my office has brought up and some of my colleagues' offices have brought up. That is something that I don't think we should let drop either. I think it's up to the local districts to decide what you need to do. And if you don't have the flexibility to make those decisions, then you're going to have a lot of costs going forward that aren't necessary. So I do want you to know that on the Assembly side, and particularly our minority comments, we are very aware of this as well. So thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. Does anyone, here we go.
Scott, good to see you again. I've always looked up to you.
That was a cheap one, Steve.
Thank you very much. 2 questions. How much is this implementation cost your district? And secondly, how much have you received back in funding?
In Race to the Top funding, we've received a little more than $70,000 over a 3-year period. In terms of what we've spent, we're well over $1 million and counting in terms of professional development for teachers, time to create assessments, time to write curriculum, time to have professional development around the modules, time to grade assessments. My largest concern, besides the student data piece that I didn't share, has to do with time. We have way too much time where our teachers are being taught by substitute teachers in order to get all the other things done in terms of training. So as educators, we tend to do what we're told, and we want to do things right. So in order to do it the right way, we have to take this time to work with our teachers, and so we've done that. But in the end, it's the children who are suffering because they don't have their first team teacher, so to speak. They're working with a substitute all too often.
Unfunded mandates over and over again we hear at the local level, whether it's school districts, whether it's municipalities, over and over and over again. The pushback, the cost comes back to you and me. And this can't continue on. We of course were promised several years ago that if we implemented the tax cap, the unfunded mandate relief would follow soon thereafter. We're not holding our breath because we'd all be passed out by now. Keep up the good work in Williamsville. Good to see you again.
On this one too, what you anticipate is going to cost you to move forward from here to implement Common Core?
That's difficult to predict. Certainly, we are going to continue with professional development. We have the module implementation that we're doing for ELA, not for mathematics. Also, the whole online testing piece, and there are significant costs to implementing that in terms of what types of devices can be used, that keyboards have to be part of the devices, so on and so forth. All of the data that has to be reported on student-teacher linkages, but based on how much time a teacher spends with a particular student, all of that has to be organized in a meaningful way and provided back to the state education department as well. So there are tremendous hidden costs behind the scenes as well of things that districts have to do. We're fortunate in Williamsville. We have good resources in our school district. I'm not sure how other districts are getting this done. I worked in a small school district before I came to Williamsville, and it must be an enormous undertaking, particularly for some of our smaller districts.
Did you price out the data mining?
I'm sorry?
Did you price out the amount it would cost you for the data mining to hire an outside company?
It's between $1 and $5 per student. You get 4 choices among companies. There's Datacation, in Bloom, a couple other ones, and they range in cost from $1 to $5 per student. So for us, it would be between about $10,000 and $50,000 to provide them our data. I'd like to know where that $10,000 to $50,000 is to do their field test for them. I think Pearson should pay for that.
Just 2 more things. You getting pushback from the parents on the data mining part of this? A lot of parents saying, I don't want my child's information put out there?
I don't know if it was pushback. I think it's more support, because this is one area where we've tried to get out in front. One of the things I was told by an official from the state education department is you'll be sacrificing the rest of your race to the top dollars that you haven't spent yet. And I said, well, that's fine, because we spent all ours already.
Well, it costs you more than that. The last one, Board of Regents announced today that they're going to be cutting the time for the test, and they're going to be cutting the tests, what the kids are going to be tested on, but they're going to be cutting the time of the test by 10 minutes. Any reaction to that?
To me, it's like trying to empty out Lake Ontario with a teaspoon or a water hose. It's a small little piece, perhaps as a signal that they're hearing some of the concerns. The tests have gotten longer, and students have also up to 25%, for example, in mathematics, have 25% less time to complete them. So we're asking students to show what they know and what they can do, or are we asking them how fast they can do something? So there's that concern, and I'd like to see the state education department take a little bit more of an aggressive approach. Certainly 3rd grade is a little bit young for a state test. 4th grade, I think we could live with that. I think maybe 4th, 6th, and 8th. Let's start there. Let's look at 3 through 8 testing. I share with parents all the time that, there's AIS implications and things of that nature, but at the end of the day, the performance of a child on a 3 through 8 test is not going to determine what college they get into. They're going to have enough high stakes to high school and start taking high school credit-bearing courses. That's when really it does get high stakes, and you know, we start really sorting and classifying students, I guess. But I really think we could reduce the number of tests that are given, particularly in the 3 through 8 grade range. I understand the need for some testing. We spend $55 billion a year in New York State on public education. There needs to be some type of measurement. I understand that. But right now, there's too much pressure, too much anxiety, and we need to reduce that.